Good morning and welcome. I'm Bob Wolf, and on behalf of the Spice Committee and the Program Subcommittee, chaired by Nancy Glass and co-chaired by Stefan Pinkney, welcome to another in our wonderful online series for Spice. Today, we're pleased, as always, to have the return of Cantor Mary Thomas, talking to us on finding purpose and seeking meaning in the unexpected, which is pretty on topic. Just a couple upcoming events, and then we'll turn it over to Cantor Mary. Wednesday the 3rd, Spice via Zoom, artistic representation of the Haggadah's Four Sons, featuring Rabbi Beth Nichols, who has now come full swing into the rotation from our clergy. Wednesday the 17th of March, which is not a St. Patty's Day festival, although many of us celebrate Erev St. Patty's Day as well as St. Patty's Day, so there may be a few hangovers. But luckily, we have one of our neighbors talking to us, Rabbi Yossi Groner, who's going to talk about the Kabbalah, one of the great traditions of Jewish mysticism. The temple has a full set of events for Purim, and rather than sit here and try and take the time to go through all of them, the newsletter that you should have received this morning from Spice, giving our future events for 2 months, and then a lot of other things going around the temple. You can do that or go online, and there's a Purim gateway specially set up for this. This Saturday at 5:30, Sharing the Light, a service of healing, a Havdalah service with Temple Bethel's clergy emeriti, Rabbi Judy Schindler and Cantor Andy Bernard, who remain a vibrant part of our temple, thank God. And Tuesday, 23rd at 8 p.m., Brotherhood Pro Sports in Charlotte in the Pandemic, featuring Charlotte Observer Scott Fowler. I've heard him speak to Brotherhood in the past, and if you're interested in sports at all or just what's going on in Charlotte, he's a great speaker, a lot of fun. So stay tuned afterwards for the social breakout rooms, and we hope to see all of you there. Stay well, get your shots, wait a couple of weeks, and then get out and start to live your life again. God bless. Cantor.
Thanks, Bob. Even the introduction makes me happy. I am so glad to be here with you all today. I always love my time at Spice, and this is the very first time that I've come to you all in this nearly year that we have been at home. And of course, for me in that, there's sadness because I think about the last time I was with you all and walking around the room with the microphone and all of the joy that I get of, jogging between tables and making sure that everyone can be heard, and getting to talk to you all as you eat lunch. So there's that piece that is a part of the past, but there's also so much blessing to get to be with you all today in this new way. And I'm happy to see your faces. And of course, I see so many of you in other parts of the synagogue, in the other parts of our digital synagogue life. But to be with you all in this configuration is pretty great. And I could not be more happy to be here. So, what are we going to talk about today? All right. It's a little abstract. It's a little theological. But also I found us at least 2 moments of levity. Okay, so I'm going to promise at least 2 moments of something. But I'm using a different format for my slides this morning. So bear with me if there are any kinks along the way. Let's see what happens. All right, here we go. So when I was trying to decide what we would talk about today, I was cognizant of the fact that at this moment on February 17th, we are just 2 weeks out from Purim. And Purim, of course, is a holiday that is derived from the book of Esther, which is one of the 5 Megillot, the 5 scrolls that are from the writings section of the Tanakh. And actually, before we talk about this, let me see you all. Tell me everything you know about Purim before we talk about my quote. Costumes. So it's a tradition that we wear, we wear costumes, we dress up. I heard someone last week referred to it as the Jewish Halloween, so we'll just say that. And I heard Hamantashen from somewhere. Ah, Brenda, I thought it sounded like you. What else?
Saved us from
The Grogger, okay? And because we want to drown out the sound of Haman's name because he is, the big big bad guy of the story. Gambling and drinking from Nadine. There are definitely pretty clear traditions around the imbibing of beverages. So, if you were to imbibe the beverages and then also observe Erev St. Patrick's Day, that could be quite a bit in a 2-week time frame. Just want to point that out.
It's already 39 people.
Other things about Purim.
Jewish heroine. But I will.
A heroine from Francis. I hear it. So we have a Jewish heroine. Shalach Manot. Okay, we're going to come back to the heroine in a little bit. Shalach Manot, we send gifts of food to others. All right, what else? All right, here's a question. Is God in the Megillah? The book comes right from the Bible.
I don't think in the Christian version.
Ooh, in the Christian version. In the Megillah, in the actual scroll, in the actual text.
God is not there.
In the actual text of the book of Esther, God is not in the story. Holy cow. So here you have a book that's in our Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, and there is not one mention of God in the entirety of the book. Has anybody heard of a Hamelech scroll? Maybe Amalia knows. Does anybody know of such a thing as a Megillat Esther Hamelech scroll? God is behind the scenes. Thank you, Amalia. Okay, and Lynn, of course, knows that Hamelech means the king. So in the Purim story, who's the king? If I had a prize, I'd give it to you for saying his name right, but I don't have a prize.
Achashverosh.
Okay, so we just had the English pronunciation and the Hebrew pronunciation, and in the very first Purim spiel that I ever ran at Temple Bethel, we called him King A throughout the entirety. So King Achashverosh. And there's a tradition that not all Esther scrolls, but some, more than some, many, are written in such a way where the scribe lays out the words where the word Hamelech, the king, appears at the top of most of the columns in the entire book. So there's a scribe tradition that is meant to subconsciously remind you as you move through reading the Megillah in Hebrew that God is at the top of every single column and that God is working behind the scenes. While you never utter God's name or acknowledge God or talk about God in the reading of this Megillah. Okay. Other thoughts about Purim or ideas about this reality that God is not in the book of Esther? Okay, now let's look at my little text. Here we go. So this quote, I would love for someone to read it once we get all the way up in full screen. Here we go. Would somebody read this in English?
I'll read it, Mary.
Go for it.
On the contrary, if you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, Perhaps you have attained to royal position for just such a crisis.
All right. So who is speaking here? Who is he speaking to? And what is the idea? It's hard for me to see hands in this format. So if you've got the answer, just unmute and go for it. Who is speaking? Who is being spoken to, and what is the idea here?
Mordechai is speaking to Esther and telling us she has to become a leader and say something and use her authority.
So, okay, great. So Mordechai, who is Esther's cousin, but older, so more of an uncle figure, usually we think. Mordechai is saying to Esther, there is this plot afoot, and you are the best positioned person to make a difference. Now, this last piece, perhaps you have attained to your royal position for just such a crisis. What does he say?
I have a problem with a little bit before when it said that the deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter.
Because of the translation?
No, what is other quarter? Where will the deliverance come if not from her?
Oh my gosh. You know what? That wasn't the question I asked when I read these words. I wasn't worried about it at all. That was not the angle I was concerned with when I chose this text. What do you think?
I really am surprised. I never noticed it before.
Right. I never noticed it before either. You just picked it out.
Right.
Well, I think we'll have to do our homework then, the two of us, and see what we come up with.
Okay, we can email it to the group later. Yes,
it wouldn't be the first time. But the end of the sentence, which is this idea that, so many weeks ago, knowing I would, starting to wrap my brain around Purim, what is this about? Perhaps you have attained to royal position for just such a crisis.
She was chosen queen, and because she was chosen queen, that was her destiny to be able to save the Jewish people.
So that is the $100 million word of the day, destiny, right? So Mordechai suggests in this book in the Torah where God is not named that perhaps this is Esther's destiny. What do you think about that? The idea that she is destined and put in exactly the right place to be able to solve a problem.
Sometimes destiny needs some help.
So sometimes destiny needs help. Okay, what else?
We're presuming that there's going to be a crisis.
So at this point in the story, Mordechai is pretty certain that there's going to be a crisis. Yes. What else?
Yeah, she's in grave danger. This is fate, this is destiny, but she doesn't know which way it'll go.
Right. Because there is so much risk. She is the Purim story, if you've never read the Megillah, okay, from cover to cover, it's dark. I mean, it is really, really dark and scary. It is not a light and it is not a light, frivolous read by any stretch of the imagination. It is really about confronting actual physical risk and facing a very significant existential threat. And in the case of this story, Esther is at the center of the solution where the outcome is positive. But there's murder and executions and all kinds of genocide and like really terrible things. This is not a light book by any means. And that makes our celebration of Purim really, I mean, that in and of itself is something we could talk about for an hour easily, but we won't. That in the face of this existential crisis, we dress up in costumes and we, have a lot of alcohol and we have big parties and we eat a ton of food. It is a party in the face of being aware, having an awareness that external threats exist. So
it also says that each of us, like Esther, has to understand our responsibility for not standing still and doing nothing. Because the result of that in her case would be the loss of her and her father's house. Whereas doing something, she has a chance to save the entire people.
Right. And it was not easy for her, right? I mean, you don't want to compare too many people to Moses, but, Moses didn't want to be the leader. Esther certainly needed a little coaxing in order to understand that this is exactly what she needed to do, that she was the only person who could actually get the job done. So it's a beautiful quote. And I don't know this for certain, but I'm guessing in, more widely circulated Christian translations, it's often translated as perhaps you were born for this very moment, or perhaps you were created for this very moment, because I will see it out in the world on t-shirts, and a poster. It's, a very popular motivational quote in the world, in the Christian world, that I definitely see in pop culture. So I wondered what Judaism thought about destiny, right? Is she really destined? And what might we learn about this concept of destiny? So, all right, what is destiny anyway? There are a lot of different ways that we could have answered the what is destiny question. And there are a lot of other texts that we could point to. But I decided to focus on one. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive, as deep as you can get in less than an hour in the middle of a weekday, on one particular book. This is what it looks like. I ordered it for myself from Amazon when I asked myself the question, what does Judaism really say about destiny anyway? And it is called Kol Dodi Dofek, which means listen, my beloved knocks. And it is by Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, whose dates are 1903 to 1993. Soloveitchik, super famous. The first time I ever read Soloveitchik, just for a blast from the past, is because when I was 22, maybe, Rabbi Jeremy Barris said, you should read this book. And he put a copy of Soloveitchik's Halachic Man in my hand. And I read it because the cool young rabbi told me to, and it was really great. So Soloveitchik was a leader in modern Orthodox Judaism. He was the head of the seminary at Yeshiva University in New York for a very, very, very long time. So he's a thought leader in the modern Orthodox world. So as I share these couple of ideas from him, they are definitely Orthodox in nature. They are not necessarily, from within the bosom of our Reform movement, but I do think that they are instructive. They could be instructive for us. So what does Soloveitchik have to say? Okay, this tiny little book, and let me tell you, it's teeny, it's very small. This is important to know. This was based on an address that he originally gave in 1956 in Yiddish. So this was originally delivered in Yiddish, and I read it in English. The book developed out of this initial address to I'm going to tell you the right thing. So the religious Zionists of America on the 8th anniversary of Israel's independence in 1956. Okay, so that's the context. That's how old, so this is 70 years ago that he's thinking these things. I'm not going to share any of the pieces that are really particular to Israel, but much more the broader concept. He argues that there are two ways of existing in the world, okay? You can have what he called, these are his terms, an existence of fate or an existence of destiny. Okay? So now we're going to hear what the distinctions. Before I go on, what do you think the difference between fate and destiny might be? Any ideas?
I'm back to the existence of fate. It's passive, I think, and the other one is active, but I'm not sure. Do I have it reversed? One is passive and one is active.
I think you're exactly right about that. Let's hear him talk about it. Okay, there are many, many, many words here. Does somebody want to read the big words? Go for it, Nadine.
It is the factual existence, simply one line in a chain of mechanical causality, devoid of significance, direction, and purpose, and subordinate to the forces of the environment into whose midst the individual is pushed, unconsulted by providence.
Okay, there's 2 more slides. Can we get some responses before I go forward? What do we already know about Soloveitchik's fate, definition of the existence of fate?
Here's what it is.
It's a perspective that it is what it is. I mean, this language, simply one line in a chain of mechanical causality, right? Like, I'm just the product of whatever came before me, and it falls like dominoes. Devoid of significance, direction, or purpose, and subordinate. I mean, this is really strong. This is really strong. Subordinate to the forces of the environment. Let's go on. Now, just for context, the eye of fate emerges as an object. When he says that, he means the individual, right? The individual who has this fate mentality emerges as an object. As an object, man, his words, right? It's not from 1956. No one was so worried about saying their or his and her. As an object, man appears as acted upon and not as actor. He is acted upon through his passive collision with the objective outside. Man, oh man. Through his passive collision with the objective outside as one object confronting another. What do you think about that?
You can take responsibility, or it could be, oh, well, shrug your shoulders, and there's a big difference.
Right. It's implying the way that he talks in the strength of his language. He's implying that somebody might not take responsibility and is passive in the way that they move through the world. Other ideas?
It sort of denies free will.
It does kind of deny free will. Or no, before I say, how do you think, how so? How so?
Well, and the fact that you're just subject to fate, and you yourself have no choices to make that enable you to decide to do X or Y as opposed to Y or X.
I think the point I would make on that, and what I think he would say, is that he doesn't use this language because it's very contemporary, is that these are 2 mindsets, and that this description that it seems to eliminate free will is, a place you get yourself to where you can no longer see your free will and then lack agency, right? And I think free will is the really big question here. And in neither of his models does he deny free will. It's there. It's really about how you are able to harness your free will or not. Okay, other thoughts about this? The existence of fate?
Well, it calls upon inner strength, and some people don't rise to that occasion. They don't see it as their responsibility.
Uh-huh. As you say that, I'm going to give you the last quote, the last piece of this quote, which speaks exactly to your point. There we go. The eye of fate is hurled into a sealed dynamic that is always turned outward. Man's existence is hollow, lacking inner content. And that was the point to your point, Janice, right? Lacking something inside, some substance and independence. The eye of fate denies itself completely because the sense of selfhood, okay, I think this is really big. The sense of selfhood and objectification cannot dwell in tandem. So that and again, this is his argument. We can all take it or leave it. We don't need to ever think about, if this is complicated to us personally, so you leave it. But I thought it was kind of interesting. The sense of selfhood and objectification cannot dwell in tandem. So the sense of like true personhood and agency, like Bob was talking about, and objectification, being acted on by the outside, not being able to make your own choices. You can't have both at once, is what he's saying. So I promise.
In a sense, because you can choose not to make a choice.
Say more.
I mean, there have been times in my life where I've come to a fork in the road or a turning point, and I just said, I'm going to sit back, I can see what happens. And if I don't like it, I can do something about it maybe. But in terms of the choice itself, I'm just going to sit back and see what fate has in store.
Right. Choice is active. Even choosing not to do something can be active, can be a choice, right? Sometimes that is the right choice. And Esther, that's not the choice she made, right? But yes, at different times in our lives, the choice may be to not send the email, to not make the move, to, not call the relative who did the thing, and to let it be, for a while. So, because I promised this would not be all theology and philosophy today, I was thinking, could I come up with a Jewish song that somehow had something to do with this idea? And what I came up with surprised me. I'm redoing my settings so that I think I'm going to be able to share better. What I came up with surprised me, and let's talk about why afterward. We're going to take, it's a long song. So use this as your brain break and sit back and relax and think about why this is what we're looking at this juncture in our conversation. Here we go.
To death. Oh, dear Lord. You made many, many poor people. I realize, of course, it's no shame to be poor. But it's no great honor either. So what would have been so terrible if I had a small fortune? If I were a rich man, yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum. All day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum. If I were a biddy-biddy rich, idle-diddle-diddle-diddle man, I'd build a big tall house with rooms by the dozen right in the middle of the town. A fine tin roof with the real wooden floors below. There would be one long staircase just going up and one even longer coming down, and one more leading nowhere just for show. I'd fill my yard with the chicks and turkeys and geese and ducks for the town to see and hear, squawking just as noisily as they can. And each loud will land like a trumpet on the ear, as if to say, here lives a wealthy man. If I were a rich man, yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum, all day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum. If I were a biddy-biddy rich, idle-diddle-diddle-diddle man, I see my wife, my Goldie, looking like a rich man's wife with a proper double chin, supervising meals to her heart's delight. I see her putting on airs and strutting like a peacock. Oh, what a happy mood she's in, screaming at the servants day and night. The most important man in town will come to fawn on me. They will ask me to advise them like a Solomon the wise. If you please, Rebetavia, pardon me, Rebetavia, posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eyes. And it won't make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you really know. If I were rich, I'd have the time that I like to sit in the synagogue and pray, and maybe have a seat by the eastern wall. And I discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day. And that would be the sweetest thing of all. If I were a rich man, yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum, all day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum. Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?
Love that.
Yay. I mean, I'm glad for the love that's, because I could just watch that all day long. I watched Fiddler all day. It was great fun. Okay, so talk to me about Tevye and the existence of fate.
Well, I have a question, I guess. Well, he was predicting, or not predicting, had an idea of what it would be like to be rich. If you're rich, it was your fate. You were just born rich, I guess. But your destiny is he's going to be active and do all these things with what he has not acquired. He really didn't acquire. It was his fate. He just got it. But he's going to do things with it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's super clear to me.
Right. That's my thought. That's all.
Yeah. Right. How many, what different, especially for those who are really familiar with the lyrics where they stay with you, what are some of the lines that are very clear that he thinks he's just got what he got, nothing to do about it?
Say that again.
What are some of the lyrics?
Okay.
Like, are there some specific things that point to this idea of fate?
God decreed I should be what I am.
Right, at the tail end, after all that, he said, "You who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it have spoiled some vast eternal plan?" Right? So I mean, it's very, very clear. Yeah, thank you, Nadine. You got it. I'm reading the comments. Right. So in his laundry list of things that he wishes he could do if his fate were different.
Right.
Right. They're all very admirable. One of the things that struck me listening to it, he's like, if I were rich, people would ask my opinion, and they think that if you have stuff, then you know things, right?
That's what I was going to say. And it doesn't matter if you're rich. They make the assumption that you know what you're talking about.
I see you. Nadine has not changed.
Which means nothing in reality.
Right. And we know that as modern people, but from his fixed mindset, which I think, again, if I were going to use a modern terminology, I would say that we could bring the concept of a fixed mindset into alignment with what Soloveitchik is talking about, right? That you kind of get what you get, and there's not much you can do to change it, right? So fixed mindset, you're either good in math or you're not. You either are musically talented or you're not. You're born poor, you're born rich. Like you are, you're not. There's no way to change. Versus the growth mindset, which I think is more in line with what Soloveitchik talks about, destiny, which we'll look at, that gives you a little bit more agency. And it's interesting. Before we played Tevye, I said it made me really sad. And I want to just unpack that for a second, because I love Tevye, right? Like I watched that musical the first time I was probably 5 years old, and I've watched it hundreds of times. And there's something so heartwarming about the character that I feel an affinity to. And just in, reading Soloveitchik's work, which is strongly pro having this idea of destiny is better than having the idea of fate, right? His language is clear. And I want to argue that none of us are here to say, I certainly don't think that one is better than the other. They're just different. And that, I also think it's not ever our business to judge another person and their mindset and what is right for them or not. But Soloveitchik does make that argument. And Tevye is stuck in that model that that Soloveitchik aligns with fear and not being able to move past things that are so insurmountable. So he goes on in the book to talk about when you feel like the whole world is against you, when you feel like you can't change where you are consumed by, you can be consumed by fear, because you do not believe, an individual might not believe that they are able to make a change for themselves, because they believe that the world is fixed, right? Is, maybe to use Bob's word, that they lack free will.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where does that all fit in with the Warsaw Ghetto? Those European Jews in Poland were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They passively got put into the ghetto, and for a period of time they accepted. Now, when they finally decided they knew they were going to die anyway and they're going to have an uprising, did it switch over from fate to destiny?
Maybe so. And I think that's really part of the final, the end, the bow that we need to put on this at the end.
I would like to have a bow.
Let's try to get to the bow. And just again, because we want to appreciate Soloveitchik's thought in its moment in time, right? This is 1956. And it is an address to Zionists. And, if you know anything about sort of the development of Zionism, and also just the outpouring that was necessary for the early Israelis to feel tremendous agency coming out of the Holocaust, it contextualized in that way, his thought also makes sense, right? They were so concerned with being active and being agents of change because they are like a fraction of a moment in the scheme of the history of time removed from the Holocaust. Okay, let's look at what he has to say about destiny.
One other thing, if I might.
Sure.
Is that this is 1956, and Israel is also making the decision to become a player on the world stage at the Suez.
Correct.
He's also addressing that as well, because I know what he was actually.
Yes. Yes. All right. So here we are with destiny. Would someone like to read the first one?
I can do it.
Go for it.
It is an act of existence when man confronts the environment into which he has been cast with an understanding of his uniqueness and value, freedom and capacity, without compromising his integrity and independence in his struggle with the outside world. That kind of might be an answer to my question.
Say more about that. How does that answer your question?
No, I just said from just existing, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, I call that existence, at some point to realize your uniqueness and, struggle with the outside world. That's the way I see that, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So this idea, when a person confronts the environment into which he has been cast with an understanding of uniqueness, value, freedom, capacity, right? That you have a sense inside that you have something to contribute, that you can make choices that are risky, right? Like when you confront the environment into which you have been cast, that to me implies all kinds of risk. And it makes me think of Esther, right? She's got herself in this palace. Nobody knows she's Jewish. She has got to save the day, but she understood her unique role and her value and her capacity and chose to act. So I think we have 2 more slides again on this. Man, so this is tricky, and it helps marry the 2 ideas a little bit. Man is born as an object and dies as an object, okay? So this, I want to contextualize this in pages and quotes I didn't give you. He's saying that fate, the piece where you are being acted upon, everyone is acted upon at some point. Just the process of being born, right? You don't choose to be born. You don't choose the things that your parents are choosing for you as a young child. They're all numbers of things that are fate, that are fate to us in our own lives. So that's what he's saying here. Man is fated to be born and fated to die, right? It is determined and out of their control, most likely. But it is within his capacity in these years that we live to live as a subject, as a creator and innovator who impresses his individual imprimatur on his life and breaks out of a life instinctive, automatic behavior into one of creative activity. So moving past just going through the motions, but purposefully creating and innovating based on who you are as a person. Okay, this is so big. According to Judaism, man's mission in this world is to turn fate into destiny, an existence that is passive and influenced into an existence that is active and influential, an existence of compulsion, perplexity, and speechlessness into an existence full of will, vision, and initiative. Destiny bestows on a man a new status in God's world. It bestows upon man a royal crown, and thus he becomes God's partner in the work of creation. What do you think?
Cantor, I like this. I really like what he says because, to me, fate, like you said before, it's like you're born into a situation, you're born into a family and expectations from that family. But you can take that fate And you can take everything that fate means and you can turn it around and you can make yourself something or something different, and you can be whatever you want to be. You just need to not be stuck in the bracket of your fate, right? You need to break out of it and say, yes, this is where I came from, but that doesn't mean that's where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Tevye and
Isn't
his.
this a thread that,
Oh, who's first?
okay,
Janice.
let me go.
Oh,
Hey, it's Alan.
all right, Alan, you go.
Okay, this is a thread that runs throughout the entire stream of Judaism. You think of the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur service. God lays before us, choose life, make the option. He tells us that he writes in the book of life, who shall live and die, but he says, you can do things to change the stern decree. The whole concept of Judaism is a destiny-based choice and pick your own options theology.
Uh-huh. I totally agree. Janice, then Bob.
I believe the choices Tevye had were few because of time and place. And it's not like he was going to have the money to go to university or maybe even the permission as a subject of the czar. So his fate turned into destiny when they had to leave for survival. And they will have many, many choices ahead, and the road will be challenging. But I guess being a granddaughter of two people who left the Ukraine they had to or wouldn't survive. I see this differently because the Jews under the Tsar didn't have a lot of choices in career, to make money. They were kept down. They were very limited subjects. And then, of course, with this oppression, he had to choose destiny. And this guy worked from morning till night. My dad was a laundry picking up laundry rugs. And he had his education interrupted because of during the Depression, their tailoring shop went under and he had not finished high school. I lived with the consequences of that, as we did. And I see this fate very hard for Tevye to have broken out and still supported his family. It's not like those girls were going to go work at the Burger King and he was going to have a choice. We had Russian immigrants that we still are friends with. When they came to Chicago from Belarus, they had nothing. They weren't allowed to take anything. And their son worked at the Burger King at 14 until they could get their English better. They were highly educated. They were taking furniture off the street, and they're very successful people now. I just see this a little different.
So I think I'll hold my comment. Bob, then Donna.
Yeah, maybe I apologize if I'm stuck on this, but to me, it goes right back to Genesis, because God put Adam and Eve in the garden as objects, but he gave them the ability to not be objects if they so chose. But at the same time, there are consequences: expulsion, death, pain, and birth, all of these things. So I think that destiny says, not only can you take yourself away from fate and have a say in where you go, but you have to be aware that there are consequences when you do it.
We're living in very good times in terms of our luck. I was raised by two parents who always said, you can do whatever you want to do, be whatever you want to be. And I think to a great extent, it's, if you're born into poverty and extreme poverty, even today, you just don't have the choices that people have that aren't worrying about putting food on the table and where they're going to sleep at night. With that said, Tevye, I think, was in that situation. You know, Jews several generations ago didn't have those choices. But there is something, you know, later in the story, he does make choices that I think show what a modern thinker he is. And the one that stands out is when his daughter marries someone that's not Jewish, you know, and he gives a blessing there, you know, maybe under his breath, but, you know, that's a huge step, I think, and just shows he's not accepting fate there in that moment.
Right. I mean, Tevye certainly grows throughout his throughout the story. The movie version, or you know, the original book version that was 60 plus years before the movie. But I think that this is not. I think that these concepts are so clearly. We all have. This is about privilege, right? Like, some of us have the privilege in this very broken system in which we exist to leverage some of our destiny more readily than others, right? And certainly from a historical perspective, certainly Tevye didn't have the ability to like become a cosmopolitan man or something like that and, you know, totally change it. Certainly not. And he definitely develops and makes that choice at the end, that very bold choice to take the young kids that he had left and his wife and to go to America. I mean, that is about destiny, very much so, I think, and requires a tremendous amount of bravery. So, a question I have for you all is about the title of this book, okay? It is called Kol Dodi Dofek, which is it's a quote from Song of Songs, actually, though I didn't look up the verse, so I couldn't tell you that, but I've definitely sung those words in an art song that came from Song of Songs, so I'm positive of that. And it means it means listen, my beloved is knocking. My beloved knocks. What does that title have to do with what we're talking about?
Fate is knocking, and you can take your destiny in your hands from it.
Uh-huh. Or maybe said differently. Well, I'll wait. Anybody else? How else would you interpret the title?
Opportunity.
Opportunity is knocking. Okay.
Can I say something, Bob Larrick?
Of course, Bob.
Thank you for this discussion. I find it very relevant to our times, and I have a sheet underneath that relates to it also. Awaken to Your Life's Purpose with Gene Houston, who I know from Wainwright House, which I had represented at one time at the UN with Rabbi Rothman, was president of it, Eastern and Western. How do we evolve the human condition? She's doing something online, by the way. If anyone's interested, as well as Humanities Team, which talks about change and the human condition, but the issue of the Jewish fate and to be leaders to a new world in the Abrahamic Brotherhood and some of the things we have right here in Charlotte with the ADL, which has some other sheets, which does against anti-hate, just looking at not only Jewish hate, but Black and Asian. And also our new Center for Justice, Social Justice and Reconciliation, Rabbi Gopin of, George Mason on Reconciliation, U.S. Peace, and the need to not be afraid of our religious issues and the holiness issues, of which the libertarian, conservative, anti-government, personal character alone issues, no money, talking about rich and poor, not my son. He's going broke, and causing me too. But the need to create different opportunities for the region and the mayor and governor who's interested in Martin Luther King issues of cultures of mutual respect, which our Rabbi Nichols is fully aware of and promoting also. It's better to be friends than enemies. And why shouldn't we be a leader for America, not only Jerusalem, but America and the world to a better place?
So I will say that I said to Nancy before we got on the call that I didn't think I would talk about Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks today, But I will say one thing about Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks today before we go back to destiny, which is that, gosh, was this past Saturday only? Ginger, was that this past Saturday that I was talking about this? Okay, great. Just a few days ago, I was listening to a YouTube of Rabbi Sacks on Saturday morning before I got to services, and on the treadmill having my nice Shabbat morning, and then I came to lead services, and he made this interesting argument that I hadn't really thought of before, that without getting into the specifics of it, that some of the things he's speaking particularly about Torah in this case, but we could expand this to the world, and this is definitely something we talk about, that sometimes stuff's broken because we need to exercise our freedom, our free will, and execute on our destiny to fix the thing. Sometimes problems exist so that we can show that we are able to take the steps to fix the problems. They're our job to fix. That is part of what it means to be active in your destiny, to be active in being a free person. It is that you have to make choices and actively do the work to fix the things that are broken. So when we look at how broken our system is, when we look at how much trouble there is in this world, it is so deeply Jewish, and I know you all know this because this is Temple Bethel after all. It is our job to do the work, right? It is our job to help use what we have to continue to improve this world in which we live, so that many, many people will be empowered to make the kinds of choices that enable them to fully meet their destiny. So the title, Kol Dodi Dofek, listen, my beloved knocks. The beloved here is God, right? This is a book of theology. So the sort of spiritual message here is, if you're paying attention, opportunity to become who you are supposed to be, to meet your destiny, to be to take that full advantage of your potential, presents itself throughout our lives, right? How do we know what we're destined to do? We pay good attention. We listen to our inner voice. We build strong relationships and study and come into communities like Spice and learn from one another. And you just never know when the opportunity will come for each one of us to fulfill our destiny. Surely when Esther went to the palace to be evaluated as a potential queen, surely she did not know that the ultimate outcome of that plot was that she would be the savior of the Jewish people in that moment. And in that same way, I think for each of us, you never know what will happen in the morning when you wake up. But it is our choice as people who are destiny minded, yet recognize that there are all sorts of things that happen that we can't control that are our fate. That if we are destiny minded, we might open ourselves to hearing that voice of the beloved knocking and leading us to where we are meant to be. That's what I got.
Thank you for this discussion. I think God sent me here also, which brings up the importance of our current politics and the issue of honesty and humility, which I speak with Reverend Sadler about, or he speaks with me also about the need for humility within all of our faiths, and the idea of honesty for reconciliation, truth
Thank you,
and
Bob.
reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate it, your thoughts.
Thank you.
Two quick notes. One is, speaking of Rabbi Sacks, Rabbi Knight will be talking about the thoughts of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks in April. And that should also be fascinating as always for us. So that's something else to look forward to. And Now, if we're going to turn this over to Natalie to do her usual wonderful thing, magically put us into rooms. And we'll see y'all in 2 weeks if we don't see you before then. Bye-bye.
Good to